Okay, good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock, and we are going to get started on NEA's Reimagining Relationships, Returning and Engaging in the Classroom. So we're excited to have several NEA members to share their knowledge with us and learn, and we're going to learn from each other. A few housekeeping things before we get started. Though it says my name is Bernita, it's actually Andrea. And I'm the director of teacher quality and support members around teacher quality issues. A little housekeeping for tonight. Of course, you have the chat. So please feel free to say hello to each other in the chat and let us know where you're from. We'll be using the Q&A piece of Zoom tonight. So if you have questions as the presenters are speaking, feel free to put them there and we'll make sure that they're answered during the presentation. The presentation will be recorded, and in a couple of days, you can go to NEA's learning management system and download it or watch it from there. And we will be providing a certificate that you can also get through our learning management system. We will make sure you have those links. And Jennifer may be putting them in the chat as I speak, but we'll make sure you have those links so you can get them. Just remember to give us a couple of days. Want to also remind you that NEA does not give professional development credit, but you can take your certificate to your school, your district, or your state. Feel free to check in with your state or local affiliate for the best way to do that so you can get credit. But without further ado, I want to introduce Shelley Moore-Krajacek, who is an English and drama teacher from the state of Wisconsin. And she is also on the executive committee. So let me give it to Shelley to welcome us tonight. Shelley?
Thank you very much, Andrea. I am going to begin this webinar as we begin all meetings of the National Education Association by honoring the land on which we each sit. Let us remember that wherever we are across this nation, we are land previously served by America's first people, and we honor those people. I come to you from the land of the Potawatomi. The Potawatomi are part of the Great Lakes Band of the Anishinaabe that covered parts of what is currently Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, Illinois, and Wisconsin. They were, of course, removed from their land through a series of actions, laws, and through genocide. However, the people of the Potawatomi are not a people of the past. They are, in fact, a people of the present and the future. The Potawatomi tribe in Wisconsin is the largest employer in Forest Lake County, Wisconsin, and one of the largest employers in Milwaukee County, Wisconsin, employing lots of both First Nations people as well as non-Indigenous persons. They also are a significant political action group within the state of Wisconsin, wielding substantial political influence across the state, reminding us that our First Nations people are not just of the past, but are of the present and the future. We honor all elders, past, present, and emerging. We are called on to share their story as we share the story of America. And sharing the story of America is, of course, part of what we're doing as America's educators. We are so excited to have you here with us today for the very first webinar in our national series of the year. The NEA webinar is just one of the many ways that your National Education Association is working to help you with your professional work, both by connecting you with others and reminding you that your own colleagues are the experts and that you have a fabulous network. And we've got some incredible member practitioners here with us today with whom we are going to learn throughout the next hour. Last year was weird, but that's okay. We learned some things that we're going to continue learning and moving forward, always doing our best to do the best that we can for our students and our communities, which I know is why you are all here with us tonight. Just a reminder of a couple of things. Remember, NEA is not endorsing any particular products. You're just learning about different tools that are possibly available to you as we continue to learn from each other. So there's nothing we're specifically promoting just different tools and platforms. I also want to remind you that we come together in a shared space and a space of community. Hope that you will honor that by respecting each other and making sure that we are respecting everybody coming to the space, allowing for questions and comments. But if you are not engaging in a respectful manner and way, that we will ask you to be, we will remove you from our space. So thank you for being with us today, and we're excited to move forward. So now, as I started to say, this webinar isn't led by some folks sitting in a room somewhere concocting something. Like sometimes we end up getting with a professional development seminars as we're coming back to school. I'm sure some of you are getting programs in a box. This is not one of those. These are people who could be teaching in the room next to you. If you were lucky enough to be teaching in Michigan or Kansas, they could be teaching in the classroom next to you and could be walking into your room sharing some exciting new thing that they learned. Instead of you having to be in those two states at this moment, you get to sit in the comfort of your own home and learn from their brilliance and their expertise as they share their stories with us. With that, one last thing. There'll be an evaluation at the end, and Andrea's going to remind you of that too. I can't forget the evaluation. It's so important. With that, it is my pleasure to turn this over to the double L's, the team of Lori and Liz, who are going to take us through our learning today. All right, teach me some things. I'm ready to take notes.
Thank you so much, Shelley. We much appreciate your time today. So we're going to start with our agenda. We're going to do some introductions, our norms survey. We're going to hopefully go through and help you learn some safe spaces and how you can create that at the beginning of this year, followed up with some definitions and some next steps. So I am Lori Grainfield. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm from Kansas. I've been in the classroom over 25 years. I've taught everything kindergarten through 7th. Currently, I'm a 2nd grade teacher. I'm also the math and chess club coach and the garden coordinator. I've held various leadership roles in my local, my state, and at the NEA level. I love music, sports, and the outdoors. Liz?
Thank you. Shelley, I have to say, Lori and I have never been called LL before. As a fan of LL Cool J, I kind of like it. So I think we should keep that moniker as we move forward. My name is Elizabeth Lulis. I am a teacher in Grosse Pointe, Michigan, and I've been teaching at the secondary level for over 20 years and at the college level now for over a decade. And education has always been my first love. So almost all choices I feel like I've made in my life have been maybe in some way linked to my love of learning and being surrounded by others. So beyond my classroom work, I also help with our professional development within the district, as well as our DEI and restorative practices work. I have worked as the curriculum specialist, and currently I'm a writer and a national speaker. I kind of live in this world. Outside of this world, the most important part for me is my family. And so summer is just absolutely precious, as I think we all feel. And I heard this past week, I want to share a note that was someone referenced to me, is that August might be the longest Sunday for teachers. And I wonder if you might be feeling the same way now. I realize some people might already be back in the classroom, but really starting to think about what we can do this year. After last year, what are those ways that we can bridge our learning to make this the safest place for our students? Someone referenced in the chat wanting all of our students to thrive. And I think for Lori and I both, that's absolutely the goal. Lori, would you like to cover our norms?
Sure. So obviously you all are already muted, so way to go. You have great camera etiquette right now. And we would like you to stay engaged. We have some participation here. We can't do our breakout rooms like we normally do, but we have a Padlet. And there will be a couple of opportunities for you to engage in that Padlet and provide some ideas. And we learn from all of you also. You have great ideas. So I hope you can engage with that. Ask questions in that Q&A. Engage, be in the moment. Try to limit your multitasking, but we get it. This is the beginning of the year, but we promise to end on time also.
So as we work our way, Oh, I'm sorry, Lori. As we work our way through our agenda this evening, we want to share a few pieces of what we're doing and the why behind it. So not only is it about the topic at hand, but also those teacher tips that we all learn from each other with. So we're identifying our goals and objectives for you. And as we move forward, we will highlight the ones that are invested. And this, of course, is a great tip in your classroom as well, posting those learning targets for your students so that they recognize what it is that you're working towards. It also helps them ensure that their attention is being placed upon what the mission is for that particular moment. So with our goals and objectives, we hope to help you understand how to structure that safe learning environment for all of your learners, understand the role those safe learning environments play in fostering educational initiatives, build an understanding of the role of affect, and then throughout, we will be engaging in opportunities to learn from each other, as Lori already referenced, to share out some ideas, and if time allows, some role play that Lori will become our actress here as we move forward. So we'll highlight these as we go through for you, and then they'll also be noted on our slides in the corner. So moving backwards as you review our slides, if you want to take a peek and say, not quite sure what this was addressing, it will give you that notation back to our objectives.
So right now, we'd like you to take that Padlet, and you can use the QR code or the link there. Think about safe spaces in your classroom or your learning environment. What is your definition of a safe space? What are the characteristics of that space? What do you, if you are walking into a classroom, how would you know that was a safe space? And what kinds of things would you see? What kind of things would you hear? What kind of things would you feel? So using all of those senses, we'd like to utilize that Padlet right now, and hopefully you can get onto that Padlet and share some things. And that will be Padlet on the very first column. All right. And we're going to give you about 3 minutes or so to kind of engage, and we're going to pull a couple of those things that we see that you have on the Padlet. Oh yes, Joe, thank you very much. We will try to get that into the chat so that you can click also on the chat. Hopefully my friends behind the scenes are
Lori,
working.
I'll do it right now.
Oh, there it is. Yes, thank you very much, Ellen and Jennifer. Oh, so many people behind the scenes helping out. Awesome.
So as you're writing, one of the pieces to think about as you are creating that safe space for your students, which is going to help promote those relationships. The students want to know that there's a level of trust with you. Not all students will always want to participate in the same way. So there's an expectation when students come in that we want them engaging immediately with us and with their peers, and some might not be comfortable doing it right away. So if you haven't used a Padlet before, I'm assuming most of us now in our world of COVID, right, are pretty used to all of these different references. Think about ways that you could invest this in the classroom before you start to engage in dialogue. So students could even share out some comments and ideas before they have to orally present those to their peer group. So one aspect of using writing before presenting a discussion is also another way to help produce that safe space. If you cannot get into the Padlet for some reason, feel free to place in the chat and we will make sure to identify those as well.
I do see we have a couple of people already in the Padlet and working on it. And don't forget to think about all of those senses. So what do you see? What do you hear? What do you feel? Oh, I love that. A sign on your door that says a safe space. Yes, I have that also. Actually, mine's through Glisten, the Glisten trainings. But there are many different ones that you can get. Oh, I love the variety of ways to share out.
So one of the posts that just popped up, mine's a little bit delayed, so I apologize here. I'm not seeing everyone's comments right away. I do the same, is think about the mood of your room as you're walking in. So harsh lighting, the impact that has on us and on our brains and on our eyes, the visual. So thinking about the lower lights or the calming colors that you can use. Think about fidgets for those students. I love that, self-regulating options, flexible seating. I think scent is a big part of that. So if you're able to have essential oils in your classroom in a mister, the impact that can have for students as they're coming in. I realized during COVID, we can't all feed our students potentially as much as we used to, but a Hershey Kiss, a piece of chocolate in the door, something calming, something soothing. I realize allergies, I understand that, right? Working within the domains that we can, but thinking about at the moment they walk in, the impact the environment has as much as possible. I was excited to see that one.
I love that hearing music. I play music in my classroom all the time, along with seeing themselves around the room. And especially at the elementary, I feel like their work needs to be up too. They need to see them and see their products. So Liz, I think we've got quite a few responses. So I'm going to go ahead and go to our next spot, if that's all right.
Absolutely.
So building safe spaces, we're going to think about this from 3 different levels: our primary and intermediate, middle and high, and then higher ed. And it's important, I mean, while they all can intertwine, there's some specific things for each level. But what does it look like? What's the importance? What are some examples from our practice? And what is the environment, both physically and virtually impact? We still probably need to think about that virtual piece, even though we'd like to all be in person. We know the reality is we might not all be in person. So I'm going to start with the primary and intermediate. The very first thing is it is important to meet and greet using their preferred name and their pronouns. Using their name, not a nickname or the name they would like to be called, is very important for self-identity. Also pronouns. This can also be kind of tricky, especially if they go by different name or pronouns from what their parents know. So I always ask from the beginning and move forward from there. And then I also get to know them a little bit more, which I'll talk about in a minute. Daily check-ins. Daily check-ins are very, very important. My school uses responsive classroom and the zones of regulation. And so we talk a lot about the zones, which, what color are you in? What are your emotions right now? And then how that changes throughout the day. So while you might check in at the beginning of your day, you need to continue to check in throughout the day, especially with the littles. Listen closely to your students. This is highly important to know kind of where they are with things, and listen also to their body language. Liz will go through, hopefully we get to touch on that a little bit at the end, but listening, but watching closely to your students is also important. Oh, I wanted to click there twice. Get to know your students. What are they interested in? Not just sports. I mean, a lot of kids are interested in sports, but maybe fine arts, or they like to draw, or they might have unique talents. I always love to find out those unique talents that they have. Like I had a student last year that loved Minecraft, and that's how I hooked him into coming to reading time every time. He could show me a piece of Minecraft, and I got to learn along with him, because Minecraft's not really my thing. So I was truly interested in their lives. I became really interested in Minecraft. I won't say I'm really good at it anymore, but at least I know a lot of things about it now. Share your interest to make connections. I grew up on the farm, and I always bring some of that farming and gardening into our conversations, so they can make connections with me and how I grew up. Showing a growth mindset is super important. We are all growing, and we are lifelong learners, and we should show them that throughout the day. But with that, we need to model positive ways to handle difficult situations. COVID has been a difficult situation, but it's how we navigate through that. You can show those down moments, but also how you handle those things in a positive way can be a life skill. And then own your mistakes. I am a poor speller, and so I am a-okay with students checking my spelling, catching me up on it. I own those mistakes, but also if I make a mistake, by calling a wrong name, or maybe using the wrong pronoun, or just a general daily mistake, it is important to own that, and also models that for our kiddos.
So one piece I can't stress enough is every technique that Lori has shared is applicable K through higher ed. So even though we've divided these up more to address maybe specific concerns that would be with a particular age range, truly all of these are interrelated. So with the middle and high school level, hopefully you can tell these are all hyperlinks. So as I'm walking up my stairs here, each one of those will be a link for you to resources. And then Lori will have a series of resources to share with you at the end as well. So our sharing of these is really a huge part of our goal, just to say, hey, this is something that worked for us. Maybe you can, take a peek and see if this might work best for you as well. And so for one of these, I do always ask Lori to click on it for me in the last couple of weeks here. If you could click, Lori, for me on Think Outside the Box. And this is just a handout that I wanted to share with you that comes from the University of Limerick. And one of the pieces that I have invested fully in my classroom at the start of the year. So when I'm looking at how can I get my students to feel like they are part of a community, how can I ensure that they are problem solving together? If they're having difficulty in communicating with each other, these are some of those early pieces that we want to navigate before we start digging into our literature. And adventure education has been my hook for years for students. And this is one of the best handbooks I've ever found out there, with just a series of activities that you could use. Most of them require very few apparatuses, tennis balls, a big ball, maybe a hula hoop, and you can put these together. But one of the goals of adventure education is having the students work on a problem that they have to solve together. And as you go through and you discuss the experience that they've had, whether or not they were successful in attempts, it's more about how they went about it. So from the very beginning of our class, the students recognize that a huge focus is on us working together. So the student who comes in with this very focused individual perspective recognizes how much more we gain as we're working together. So Laura, you can go back to my steps. This is just one that I can't say enough great things about. If you've got time to peek through and maybe find one or two activities. Most activities would not take an entire class period. They're, kind of start the day with maybe 5 or 10 minutes working through a problem together. One piece that I think is so important and powerful for us at the start of the year is to identify the norms. So Lori and I had our norms for you, standard for any type of webinar. Finding those norms in the classroom And what are those patterns that you would like students to retain as you work through the year? And how important it is to recognize, one, students should be part of the building of those norms and patterns. And two, we establish them, but we also have to be willing to pivot. We have to be willing to say, okay, this might not work in this particular instance, and walking through the why behind it. So just as Lori had shared, as you're working through mistakes with students, sometimes as the older kids feel as if what they've identified and decided upon is what they need to always move forward with. And there's moments where we have to be willing to say we have to shift a little bit and be a little bit more flexible. So creating those patterns and norms together. One piece that has been super important for me in my classroom is valuing the student narrative. So when I'm looking at building that relationship with my students, it's about valuing their stories and what they bring to class. And it could be a matter of, as Lori referenced, a piece of art in their home, an artifact that they can share with you, but more it's giving that time to listen, giving that time to allow for a conversation to meander a bit, because in that meandering is ultimately where the students might begin to ask the questions that are going to help define what it is that ultimately might be that goal. The last piece I want to share is just dealing with finding space in your classroom for your students to process. So this comes from a book called Emotional Agility. And it's a perspective that your brain processes so quickly that sometimes you jump directly to an emotion without finding a space to allow your brain to actually recognize and logically kind of deconstruct whatever the experience is that you've perceived. And so providing those opportunities for your students to find that space, allowing for pauses after questions. It's really hard to do. I like to fill all silence with talking, if you can't tell already, but allowing for that pause after you ask a question. Or if a student needs that time to process, as I referenced before with the Padlet, having note cards, having a Post-it note, having something for them to be able to deconstruct and start thinking about their ideas before they have to present. So each one of these steps is going to have some resources for you. I would love to talk through all of them, but I know I can't. So just know this is something to come back to at any point if you would like to.
And Liz, somebody added something to the Padlet that I think is highly important. I want to stop and share this because I think it's so important that every person in your classroom, every human needs to be honored, understood, respected, and represented.
Absolutely.
So powerful to me. Thank you. And students feel free to advocate for their needs.
Yes.
And that's every level.
Absolutely. And I think one of those pieces we're talking about that safe space, but it's also how are you establishing a brave space? How are you establishing that space where your students recognize they can be brave, that they can be a part of that? So these higher ed levels, I don't know, Laura, if you saw, if we had anyone in our survey building level wise, was anyone with us that was from higher ed this evening?
Maybe, but I think go ahead and go over it because we
okay,
might
absolutely. And the one that I would like you to open for me, if you could, is dialogue versus discussion versus debate. And again, this is posted with higher ed, but this could be with any one of your students. And this really restructures how you communicate in your classroom. So oftentimes there, was a thought process of, oh, let's have a debate with our students. It will be lively, it will be engaging. So we think about the emotions that are part of it. And I know we don't want to equate emotions to positive or negative, but we tend to, right? The manner in which, how we're feeling in that experience, that can be very tumultuous for students. And it also positions that there's a right answer. So underneath this where it references might is right. And it can become a little bit toxic and a little bit threatening for a lot of our students in our classroom. For years as a teacher, I focused in on we're having a class discussion. Well, what this particular resource has helped me recognize is a class discussion assumes there's one right answer and that all of our conversation is leading towards that. So more important to me, and what I stress with my students from the very first week of school, is we want to identify and embrace dialogue so that we are looking for connection and we're looking at building community. So in that sense of dialogue, every voice is valued. every position will be heard, and students affirm each other before moving on. So this is just a great resource that helps you deconstruct the role that these different ways of communicating typically happen, and thinking about ways that you can invest a bit more dialogue in your classroom as you're creating that safe space for your students. Laura, do you want me to go over any others, or I think we're at 7:30, we'll move forward a little bit.
I think we're good to move forward. So we're going to roll right into some the understanding the role of safe learning environments and how they play in fostering educational initiatives. And we have this cool chart that kind of shows some of that. So Liz.
Absolutely. So I'll talk through a little bit of this, and I'm not going to read the chart to you. But if we think about initiatives existing that we might be prioritizing as educators, when we're creating that safe space and when we're focusing in on the relationship with our student, that helps you navigate every one of these initiatives. And you're looking at how are they synthesized together. So when we talk about social emotional learning with our students, when we focus in on our diversity, equity, and inclusion work, as we work to help strengthen relationships so individuals feel like they are allowed back into a community of harm's been done in restorative practices. And then as we're looking at mindfulness as a way to help our students kind of address and be aware of their emotions and how they're handling sensations within their own body, within their environments, all of these are going to be highly emphasized and helped in some way or form if you're focusing first on that relationship you have with your students in the safe space that you're placing them in. So we have links here if you're not familiar with all the initiatives at the bottom that you could go and do a little bit more digging. But ultimately, that space you create in your classroom is going to kind of help foster a lot of these other initiatives that we value as educators.
And I feel like the social emotional learning will be, again, very crucial this year because kids may come in with traumas and we don't know the trauma-based care that they will need to be successful in the classroom. You know, you need to take care of that social emotional before they can proceed with their learning. And that will be very, very important. All right.
I'm sorry, Lori. I jumped so quick as soon as the slide changes. So one of the pieces we'd like to use our Padlet for again is to think about how that safe space can help produce a classroom that will foster social emotional learning or will help foster restorative practice. Or if you go back and look at maybe some of those tips that Lori and I have shared for you, what are ways in which you could build them into your current classroom? So this is just an opportunity for us to look through our last couple slides, maybe dig in for a minute or two on some of those resources we've put there for you. And then thinking about how does it apply to either social emotional learning, DEI, restorative practices, mindfulness, for example, or more importantly, what are ways that maybe you could invest something in your classroom that you hadn't considered before. So we're back on our Padlet with our group. And this is that moment where we'll embrace the silence a little bit and let you write. But as always, Lori and I will share out a few comments as they come out for us. And on that Padlet, you'll just follow the diagram under where it says breakout 2 and having our discussion. If you can't get on the Padlet for some reason, feel free to place it in the chat and we'll make sure to reference it as well.
And one of the things that I do in my classroom is an area called Reset. It's kind of our safe zone, but it's a time to reset and then rejoin the class when the social emotional is taken care of, or maybe some sensory needs are taken care of. It's got a bike pedal underneath the desk. So if they need to get some energy out, they can do that, but in a respectful manner to the classroom and to the learning environment. It has some fidgets. It has some things to take care of a sensory need that they might have, or just a calming space. Maybe they just need to put their head down and come back and do some mindfulness techniques. I utilize also Go Noodle in the classroom with some of their breathing techniques because especially at second grade, the kids need to be taught different ways to breathe and different ways to slow down their breathing. I love classroom yoga, and some of those kinds of things, but that needs to be taught for kids to understand how to do them on their own.
So Lori, we'll give our participants maybe a minute or two if they want to share in the Padlet how those examples help build the safe space, ways that maybe they would include it now to build their safe space, or how it plays a role in some of our other initiatives.
Yeah, I love the comment of the Maslow before Bloom. That's so important in everyday classroom, but especially right now.
That was my theme for the last year. One of the pieces where I looked at the social emotional learning and the mindfulness with my students was recognizing it doesn't have to be large. We refer to them as mindful moments in our classroom. And if we started the hour with a deep breathing activity, if we just stop to pause and ask, where are we in our space right now? If we went through, as you referenced with yoga, having a few moments of stretching in the middle of our class, and recognizing that that's a true need for our students, and looking for what were the ways I knew they needed it, which we'll talk about a little bit later here. What are those ways we can start to recognize on our students' faces and in their body language that you might need to step away for a moment and focus in on what it is that is most troubling them. One piece is, it looks like, and again, mine is moving a little bit slower in the Padlet, so you might still be writing on there. One piece that helped me a lot is asking my students. I made the mistake for years of thinking I understood exactly what they needed, and that's not necessarily true. And so asking your students, what do you need? And recognizing that they will be honest in their answers, and it's not an attempt or an excuse to move away from whatever you're doing. So really, when you're looking at producing that safe space in your classroom, it's never at the expense of the curriculum. It's about small ways that you can shift the focus a little bit to give the students what it is that they need in that particular moment. Lori, is there anything else coming up on the Padlet?
Not yet, but there's
Okay.
some typing going on here.
Perfect. One piece that I suggest too is when I started investing mindfulness practices into my classroom, I was a little intimidated by what the students' response would be. And so I went to my peer group and I went to my PLC and said, can I take you through a breathing activity? I was nervous to be the leader. So thinking about some of those individuals in your building where you feel safe and you feel brave, and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Can I practice with you? And chances are the response will be, of course. And it actually led to mindfulness practices among staff as well. So just recognizing that this is always new and an attempt for a lot of us, and it may not work in one class as well as it will with another. And that is a-okay.
Oh, I love this one. Teachers need to be honest and authentic. Kids can sniff out a phony in a New York minute. Love it. Yes. And someone shared an activity that they do called Masks and Hearts. They have 2 pages, one page of masks. They list everything about themselves that people would know just by looking at them. And then the heart page is a list of things that people wouldn't know about us unless they had a conversation.
Oh, I love it.
That could be great. And for your elementary kiddos, drawing pictures there or just keywords would be great too.
Absolutely. I love that one. Lori, that mask comment's a perfect segue into our next section as well.
Yes. Yeah, cultivating relationships can be so powerful at the beginning of the school year. They will last a lifetime. If you cultivate those and build those relationships at the beginning of the year and make connections with your students, then it will make your year a lot easier with those students, even through the tough times and beyond. I still have connections with kids. Well, actually, I'm having their kids now. Um, they're coming back around and they're so happy. Oh, I had Mrs. Greenfield when I was in elementary school, and now I've got their kids. So building those connections and cultivating, I love that word, cultivating, because it continues beyond just the walls that we are in right here. All right. I think we could move on to what I would say is my favorite, even though I get to be the guinea pig tonight here. So, Liz.
All right, so one of our goals as part of this is recognizing that our students, as much as we discuss they're going to share, they don't always share. And so what are the techniques and ways that we can pick up on some of their cues that they're giving us, whether or not they recognize that they are. So Laura, if you want to move to our next slide here. What we recognize with our students is that their facial expressions and their body language is going, those nonverbals are going to share so much about who it is that they are. So I love that reference to the mask. My students and I spend so much time talking about the mask and what we wear publicly in front of others and who it is that we take the mask off for and where are the spaces they feel safe with that. Yes, we have our literal mask now in the world of COVID. So when we talk about those masks and the students hiding how they're truly feeling, well, one of the pieces we wanted to share with you tonight was the importance of recognizing that students will leak the emotions on their faces without necessarily recognizing that. So we have a couple links here for you with some kind of like trial to help you from University of Berkeley for reading facial expressions, and then some references to the importance of body language. And the work that I want to cover a little bit comes from Paul Ekman, who's a psychologist who has spent his career studying what are called micro expressions. And so micro expressions are those leakages of emotion on our faces before our brain says, oh, I don't want people to know that about me, or before our brain even realizes that's how we're actually feeling. So micro expressions are quick. They only last on your face for about 1/15 or 1/20 of a second. Probably with your family members, you're used to seeing these, you know exactly what they are and identify them. But you can train yourself to become better in investing in seeing those to help recognize, oh, this is maybe what really is going on for the student. So their behaviors don't always display the true emotion that's behind it. So the more as teachers that we can identify those micro expressions, we actually probably can get to the root cause of a problem. Lots of our students' problems, it might be showing itself in our classroom, but it has nothing to do with you. It probably has nothing to do with your classroom. And it's knowing how then do I ask those questions so that I can start to root out what is the source of those problems for our students. So what we're going to try to do is identify some emotions together and thinking about the emotion in that moment of exchange. So Laura, if you want to move to the next slide for me as we move forward here. Oh, we don't even need the slide yet. So what makes it hard is that we don't have our breakout rooms tonight, but we do have this chat here. And so I am going to show you a few of the most basic emotions that we will have. And in the chat, you can identify what it is that you think that I'm sharing. And what I really want to stress for you is that we're going to focus in on kind of the cheek, upper cheek and eye area, because if our students are wearing the literal mask, right, our COVID masks as we return into our classrooms, it's going to hide a lot of the emotion. And if you have already been back face to face with your students, you saw that. You realize how much was lost for us because of those masks. And so here's some of those tips of what we can look for to recognize what a student might actually be feeling. So as I do these for you, I always feel silly, but you know, it is what it is. So we're just going to kind of show these emotions and see if you can pull them out, and I'll give you some tips as we go. So for my first emotion, I'm going to ask that you mirror it. And I realize that I can't see you, so I'm just trusting you. With your camera on, you can hopefully see yourself in the corner. If you mirror an emotion, you start to recognize what someone's feeling. So if a student comes to you and you're not quite sure what it is that they're feeling, make that face as well. So I'm just going to go pretty close to my camera. Any thoughts of what it is that I'm feeling in that moment? So my brows furrow together, my eyes turn into smaller versions of themselves, if you will. And then my nostrils flared a little bit. So I'm seeing frustration and confusion coming up. If I was confused, my mouth would smirk a little bit as well. So there's a slight difference here. So my frustration gets a little bit harder, and frustration leads to anger. So if you're seeing these looks on your students' faces, they might need some extra help. That's that moment where you might step in and say, okay, what are we struggling with? What is it that we need to do? And it's okay to identify the struggle for a student, because you're affirming to them, you recognize something that's wrong. I used to fear that. I used to fear saying, oh, I can see there's a problem going on. And I would just go right into questions. But sometimes for those students, if you're getting to that level of anger and frustration, you got to jump to it very quickly. All right, here's another one. Any thoughts? So I'm seeing surprise and wary, and I'm glad I got both of those. If it's a true surprise, there's not fear involved. So fear's popping up now. If it's fear, the eyebrows go straight up without a curve, which is really hard to mimic, by the way. So I'm impressed those of you who can see this right away as I'm coming across this. If it's surprise, everything, think of O's, like, oh, we say it. So if it's a surprise, the eyebrows frown, the eyes almost turn into circles. And if we were able to see mouse without mask on, the mouth turns into that O as well. So knowing the difference between surprise and fear, surprise doesn't lead to panic as much as fear does. So if you're seeing the look of fear on a student's face, immediately, again, we're addressing what it is that we need to attend to. All right, here's another one. So I've got curious popping up. I'm going to wait. I probably am not doing this as well as I should. Yeah, questioning, skeptical. So when we're looking at, there's very few, really, some argue there's only one emotion that creates that unilateral of our mouth, that muscle is going to get pulled there. But when the eyes pull down at the same time, you're questioning this in a bit of cynicism. So if you're seeing that look on your students' faces, they might not be buying, if you will, what it is that you're sharing. So they're going to be a little skeptical about this, which oftentimes just think about, okay, they're skeptical. I need to reposition this. I need to reframe whatever it is that we're doing. So when you start to look for these emotions on your students' faces, you can actually address the problem before it becomes a problem, which is one of those really key pieces that's part of this. So we don't have a ton of time together, but I want Lori here to share out kind of an experience of, Lori, we're going to make you 12. So you're a 12-year-old student in my class, and you are walking in, and I just need to have a little conversation with you. Lori, how are you today? Lori, you excited for class today? Were you able to get your narrative done? I'm really excited to hear your story. Lori, is there anything we need to talk about? All right, well, hey, how about you come in and have a seat, and then you and I will touch base in a little bit later, all right? All right, Lori, thank you. So Lori is our Best Actress winner here, is showing an emotion that a lot of your students probably have given you. And it's immediate to say, okay, what is it I need to be checking in on? What am I noticing? So in the chat, if you could identify for me, what were some of those nonverbals that Lori was sharing that our teacher brain instantly says, oh, something's going on. So we've got the anxiety, no eye contact. Excellent. Anything else if it comes up in the chat? I'll give you a moment. Anxious, no eye contact. So we're picturing that right away. The apprehension, everything's nonverbal. So when we're seeing these actions from a student, we need to start saying, all right, I know I need to address this. So that the comment of Maslow before we bloom, this is one of those moments. If a student, oh, thank you, someone referenced not feeling safe. If a student is not making eye contact with you, it doesn't mean they don't want to communicate with you. It means that they're uncomfortable. So in that moment, Lori probably was not feeling very safe. And again, we know it's probably not to do with me. It's not about my classroom. She's uncomfortable in that moment. Now we need to deconstruct and dig a little bit. Lori, if you notice, I didn't see it pop up in the chat, was kind of pulling up her shoulders. And this is a protective way if a student, holds on to themselves. When you try to pull your body in and make it smaller, you're trying to take up less space. You don't want people to recognize you. You don't want necessarily to be seen. Again, it doesn't mean they don't want to communicate, but there's anxiety there. There's apprehension in that. So there's a little bit of panic about it. When I was asking questions, Lori didn't ignore me. So that was my hint. Okay, Lori will engage, but something else is going on. When a student is looking down, if a student's looking down at you and they're pulling it on themselves, your first thought is this student might be feeling shame. And that's what we need to address. What is it in that moment is making that student feel shame? And I asked Lori about her assignment, but the answer, yeah, Lori for the Oscar, thank you. I asked Lori about her assignment, but Lori was exposing all those emotions before I even asked. So my teacher brain, my first thought was, oh, Lori didn't do her homework. Now I'm smarter, right? I kind of realized, well, you know what? There's probably something else going on with Lori, maybe why she didn't do her homework. And there's something bigger that we need to talk about. So in my classroom experience with my secondary students, this is usually where I'll get the students started on something that I know they can work on their own or in small groups and pull a student out in the hall for a conversation. My classroom's too small that I don't have a space where we could quietly have that conversation. So kind of being by the door and chatting, or if I know that will make a student uncomfortable, asking, hey, can we chat later? Can you swing back around? Maybe a quick email to their counselor to say, hey, pull Lori out for a moment. You want to talk to her. Lori, I know you have a few different ways that you can handle this with the elementary students.
So in elementary, you might also see they're pulling up of legs and where they're hugging their legs, or they're becoming in the fetal position, or they might not want to sit in their chair. They might be on the floor or cuddling with something too. And so there's a few more drastic body language things that can happen also. But like Liz said, with a mask, you're going to be looking for where those eyes and the eyebrows are, and it's still downward part. For the elementary, I have what's called our personal space. It's our personal area where we can have personal conversations. And I do personal conversations with my kids throughout the day. And that may be one student that I need to say, hey, let's go to our personal conversation area. And I have some visuals there to where they don't have to be verbal because they're probably in that nonverbal way. But what I'm trying to find out what their needs are. And I typically have a needs chart there so they can point at the different symbols. And that helps them. Maybe it's just sleep. Maybe it's hunger. Maybe they just need space. They need to go to, and be away from, people right now, because when they got out of the car, that was kind of a traumatic moment for them. And so it's trying to navigate that, give them what their need is so that they can move forward with the day.
Excellent. And if you're interested in more information, again, those hyperlinks will link you to some of those resources to say, oh, I can read through my facial expressions. One I didn't share with you is happiness. I think we're used to seeing that on our faces. Hopefully our students come in with that. That is a goal. One quick tip, and Lori, feel free to move to the next slide. I was thinking about creating that safe space for your students. In the past, I always thought I was the quote unquote cool teacher because I let students choose their own seats in my classroom. And 2 years ago, a student took me aside, again, listen to your kids, and said, Mrs. Lewis, that makes it really hard. I said, well, why? What's wrong? Like, well, I don't know who I can sit by or where I can be. So as we're going into the new school year, just thinking about, especially for students who may not have stepped in the classroom for a year and a half, if you identify for them their desk and you make it personal and you make it special, it shows them right away that this is their space. This is their spot in their room that is going to be theirs. So a quick email to parents and ask what's their favorite color. What is a sport team that they like? What is, something about that student? And if you can have some visual cue for that student when they walk in on the first day, they're going to recognize, wow, I matter in this classroom and this is my space that I'm going to attend to.
So I hope that we have given you some tools and some ways that you can relook at your space, look at your environment, and kind of give you some tools to restructure some things, or just give you a pat on the back that you're doing it. Yes. And having a safe learning environment for all learners. We hope you understand the role that safe learning environments play in fostering these educational initiatives, and then the role of affect and the role play that we did. So thank you so much for your time. I think we're going to hear from Shelley now, some things, and then we'll do a Q&A.
So just real quickly, thank you so much. As I promised, I've been taking notes, and I don't know about everyone else, but I deeply appreciate that we were given the PowerPoint from the beginning. But then also I may have been clicking on things and reading stuff. So I missed stuff that now I have to go back and pay attention to. So there's that, because teachers are the worst students. I'm glad you went over the higher ed stuff, the debate, discussion, dialogue thing. I'm like, I immediately put that into a lesson plan for the first week of class with my themes in literature class with my seniors. So I'm excited. So thank you. This was amazing. And Lori and Liz show us that we have experts among us. So please, we're a great community of learners and leaders, and lean on each other now more than ever. We need to be paying attention to each other's social emotional spaces, and we need to be able to read the emotions of our colleagues too. We should apply the little emojis to the people teaching with us as well. But thank you so much. We have a couple of minutes for some questions before Andrea is going to remind us, please, about the evaluation and any other housekeeping things. So if you have any questions, we can type those in or comments in the chat, and we'll take those.
And we also wanted to remind you that the NEA has the storefront of recorded webinars, and these are awesome. I mean, I'm so stoked with some of these things. It's pertinent to, you can find something that you need. And so this is a great resource. Oh, and there I do clicking on it. There we go. I also wanted to show you at the end of our PowerPoint, we have lots and lots and lots of classroom resources. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list, but these are some of our top things that we use within our classrooms. And then there's pedagogy too. So I'm going to go back here. Yes, Shelley, sorry.
You're great. You're doing awesome. Keep going. Those were smiles in appreciation. That's the emotion I'm trying to convey, is appreciation. And while you're doing that, like you said, there's so many incredible webinars that people can go back to. And Jennifer posted the information for the exit ticket and feedback. We create these webinars based on the input of all of you. We don't create a bunch of stuff in a box. We create it based on your needs. And so please keep going, Lori. You're good. It doesn't look like anybody has any questions. They're probably all doing what I'm doing, which is going back through the PowerPoint and figuring everything out.
Well, I appreciate your time tonight. We appreciate you all for allowing us to give some of our techniques and resources from the classroom. But we all learn from you too. So thank you so much for your time. Much, much appreciated. Liz?
Thank you, Laura. I want to reiterate how important it is that we are part of that community together. As we go through and have our Padlets and seeing the comments that individuals and sharing the techniques that they have, having the idea of the mask be what everyone sees and the heart is the conversation, how important that is. I'm thinking of using that on my first day. We're going to go walk around the room and have 5 conversations. That might be our first day together. Find 5 individuals and actually converse. So looking at what it is, and then already thinking of what are those questions I can give the students to help, right? What are the things they would want to know about each other, would want others to ask them? So having that opportunity to hear from you is one of the reasons I absolutely adore doing these. So thank you so much.
Thank you all. Andrea, when you do the final thing to remind people of the evaluations, can you please answer the question about how to find the certificate? But thank you very much, Lori and Liz. Andrea?
Yes, I will do that, Shelley. Yes, thank you, Lori and Liz. A couple of things as we exit. I'm going to get out of here on time because I know people have other things to do this evening. First, their next webinar is 8/16, August 16th. And then the one after that is August 23rd. On the 16th, it's building and maintaining a humanized classroom. And on August 23rd, it's math practice and assessment and using tech tools to do that. So you will get an email inviting you because you have been to this webinar. But a few other things. There is a link in the chat to do the exit ticket. And as Shelley said, we get our topics for webinars from those exit tickets from those of you in the field. So we want to make sure that you take a minute or two and fill that out. Give us until Thursday. And if you go to the link that's for NEA partner at .learnupon.com, you can there get your certificate. You must go through that portal because it will print your name on it. And then secondly, you can also get the recording at that site as well, but give us till Thursday to get this downloaded and uploaded. And then you can get that information. I think that's it. Really want to say thank you for joining us tonight and have a really great rest of your evening. Bye-bye, everybody.